ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेष्वभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवतसेवया भगवतीर्उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवती नैष्टिकी। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकीनन्दनाय च नन्दगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरोन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमः ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन्निति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Okay, so I just I just chanted the Mangalacharan prayers. So I'll just briefly recapitulate what we discussed last week, and then we will proceed with the today's session. So last week in the first session we discussed about we gave an introduction to the scriptures. We discussed about the three types of pramanas, the three types of methods of understanding, methods of obtaining knowledge. Pratyaksha pramana, knowledge obtained through senses; Anumana pramana, knowledge obtained through hypothesis; and Shabda pramana, the knowledge obtained through Vedic evidences. We discussed about the four limitations of a human being and how Shabda pramana becomes relevant, especially for obtaining knowledge that which is beyond our senses. Shabda pramana means the knowledge obtained through the Vedic literatures. And then we discussed what are the difficulties, practical difficulties of understanding the Vedas, studying the Vedas. First of all, a very small percentage of the Vedas were available, and the Vedic Sanskrit, even the Udatta, Anudatta, Swarita, that pronunciation is known to only a very small percentage of the Brahmanas now. So we discussed the various difficulties of the studying the Vedas. Then we discussed about the importance of the Itihasas and Puranas. Itihasas and Puranas are as Vedic as the Vedas, and we discussed about the authority of the Itihasas and Puranas as being Vedic, and how through the Itihasas and Puranas we can understand the message of the Vedas. So then we discussed various principles, how the Ramayana, Mahabharata and Srimad Bhagavatam were taught before the British education started in India, how Chanakya Pandit recommends to read the Ramayana, Mahabharata and Srimad Bhagavatam. So, in this way we discussed about the various scriptures, the mood of Ramayana, Mahabharata and the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, that was the first class about the introduction to the scriptures, and then the second class on last Sunday we discussed especially three main concepts. Is Mahabharata a mythology? Generally the word mythology is used in the academic circle to refer to the Puranas and Itihasas and Vedic literatures in general. So, is Mahabharata a mythology or is it a mystical book? So, we discussed about this concept in detail, and then another one common misunderstanding which people have is that Mahabharata is written by a group of authors, and the group of authors are called as Vyasadeva. Vyasadeva is a name of a committee, it is not the name of a one person. This kind of view is also propagated in the academic circles, because they felt that how can one person write a more than a lakh of verses. So, we discussed about this misunderstanding in detail. If you remember, we had discussed about the three kinds of languages used in the Mahabharata: Samadhi Bhasha, Guhya Bhasha, and then we discussed about the three types of meanings of a word: Mukhya Vritti, Lakshana Vritti and Vyanjana Vritti. And then if you remember, we discussed about the concept of the Kuta Shlokas in the Mahabharata. The academic scholars, they say that the proof that Vyasadeva wrote only 8,800 shlokas and the later shlokas were actually added by other authors. For that they quote a verse from the Mahabharata, in which Vyasadeva mentions there are 8,800 shlokas, the meaning of which I know, Shukdev Goswami knows, but Sanjaya may or may not know it. Those 8,800 shlokas refer to what are called as the Kuta Shlokas, which come under the category of Guhya Bhasha. Kuta Shlokas are like the puzzle verses. We discussed about an example of a Kuta Shloka. So, therefore, the entire 1 lakh verses were written by one single author, Vyasadeva. That was the conclusion of the discussion. It is not that Mahabharata was written by a group of authors. And then we discussed about the purpose of Mahabharata. According to the original author of Mahabharata, that is Vyasadeva. How Vyasadeva talks about the two kinds of trees in the Mahabharata: the tree of unlimited anger called as Duryodhan and the tree of dharma called as Yudhishthira. We discussed about the various parts of the tree, and the intention of Vyasadeva in writing Mahabharata is that dharma should always prevail. And then we concluded the discussion by saying that one of the most important aspect in reading the Shastra is what is our intention in reading the Shastra. One may perform tapasya, one may have a great shastric knowledge, one may be very scholastic, but ultimately what is the intention of reading the Shastra, what is the intention of performing the tapasya. So, there are many writers and scholars, if their intention is to actually deride the Vedas, with that purpose, if the intention is to find fault with the Vedic literatures, with that purpose when they actually read the Vedas, when they write commentaries, then they do not get the ultimate fruit of the Vedic literatures. We also talked about the importance of a guru to understand the Shastra. So, these were some of the concepts which we discussed in the last two classes. So, today I will share my screen. So, today we are going to discuss the advent of Vyasadeva in Enigma. So, this is an important event which we will discuss about the advent of Vyasadeva, and also we will discuss about the contribution of Vyasadeva. You will find in the academic circles sometimes different authors, one of the objection which they raise is about the advent of the very author or the compiler of the Vedic literatures, that is Vyasadeva. They talk about how Vyasadeva was born out of an illicit connection between Parashara Muni and a fisher woman. So, we will try to discuss this story, and then we will try to give the different perspectives of the story and the contribution of Vyasadeva. So, the story of the Vyasadeva's birth, it is described by Vyasadeva himself in the Mahabharata Adi Parva. So, there was a sage Parashara Muni. He was going on a pilgrimage to different holy places. Once he had to, once he came to the bank of the Ganges, he had to cross the river. So, there was a fisher woman called as Matsya Gandha, and she would assist her father in actually ferrying the people from one end of the river to the other bank of the river. So, Parashara Muni, she started, Parashara Muni wanted to go to the other side of the river, and she started rowing the boat. And Parashara Muni, he developed an attraction to this lady, and he proposed to her, that lady, to have a union with him. But that lady said that it would not be proper for me to have a union with you without getting married. Moreover, I am under the care of my father, and it would not be appropriate. But Parashara Muni said, no, I will give you a benediction that even after having an union with me, you will remain virgin. You will retain your virginity. So, Parashara Muni, he gave this proposal to this lady Matsya Gandha, and then this lady, she had an union with Parashara Muni, and then Vyasadeva was born, and Vyasadeva immediately grew up, and he went to perform tapasya. Before going to perform tapasya, Vyasadeva told his mother Satyavati, whenever you would remember me, I will come immediately. And Parashara Muni also left Satyavati and he went. So, this particular story, how Parashara Muni had a union with a fisher woman called as Satyavati, and how Vyasadeva was born, and immediately he grew up to a young man and he went to perform tapasya. It is described in the Mahabharata. And so, this particular story, we can see, if we see the story, that Vyasadeva was born out of a infatuation of Parashara Muni towards a fisher woman. So, definitely people say that Vyasadeva was born out of an illicit connection. So, in the Vedic literatures, there is a term which is called as Varna Sankara, the unwanted children. in the Bhagavad Gita first chapter also, Arjuna talks about this Varna Sankara or unwanted children. So he says that like one of the Varna Sankara unwanted children are born when there is a union between, when there is an union outside the marriage, or sometimes within the marriage but without following the proper samskaras. So here in one sense, externally if you see, Vyasadeva is an Varna Sankara because he was born out of an illicit connection between Parashara and Matsyagandha. This lady was also called as Matsyagandha, because why this lady was called as Matsyagandha was that from her body always a odor of a fish would be always emanating. Therefore, she was called as Matsyagandha. Of course, she is also known as Satyavati. So, in this particular story, let us see what are the comments given by the Acharyas like Madhvacharya and Vadiraja Tirtha. So, Madhvacharya has written this book called as Mahabharata Tatparya Nirnay. In that he mentions Parashar Muni performed tapasya to please Vishnu to have him as a son. Parashar Muni performed tapasya to please Vishnu to have him as a son. And Parashar Muni married Satyavati, and then he begot Vyasadeva. This is the comment given by Madhvacharya in his Mahabharata Tatparya Nirnay. And another Acharya who comes in the Madhva Sampradaya, called as Vadiraja Tirtha, he mentions that Parashar Muni married Satyavati according to the Brahma marriage system. There are 8 types of Vivaha mentioned in the Shastra. Out of that, one type of Vivaha is called as Brahma Vivaha. And in fact, he mentions that Yajnavalkya was actually called to perform the marriage ceremony. Yajnavalkya was called to perform the marriage ceremony. So, these were the comments given by the Acharyas like Madhvacharya and Vadiraja Tirtha. And let us see some of the divine aspects in the story of Vyasadeva's birth. Parashara Muni, he first of all, by his mystic powers, he created a wall made of a fog, and then he had a union with Matsyagandha. And then after having that union, Parashar Muni said that I am ready to give any benediction you want. Then Matsyagandha said, please remove this bad odor of a fish which is emanating from my body. Then Parashar Muni not only removed the bad odor coming from her body, but he made her body so fragrant, filled with some divine fragrance, that for many miles the divine fragrance would actually emanate from her body. And another divine aspect of the story was that this Satyavati or Matsyagandha, she immediately gave birth to the child. And Parashar Muni also gave a benediction that you will remain virgin, you will remain a Kanya. So, we can see like these aspects of the story tell us that this birth of Vyasadeva is not an ordinary birth, although externally it appears to be like an Vyasadeva was born out of an illicit connection, but we have to carefully observe the divine aspects of the story. And Vyasadeva immediately grew up. As soon as she instantly gave birth to the child, and Vyasadeva immediately grew up, and immediately he went to perform tapasya. So, usually if Vyasadeva had been born out of an illicit connection, then that he would be an Varna Sankara, unwanted population. He would be an unwanted child. One of the characteristic of a Varna Sankara is that who are born out of an illicit connection, they would not be inclined towards tapasya or any of the dharmic activities. But Vyasadeva, he immediately went to perform tapasya in Badrikashram. So we can see the by understanding the fruit of a tree, we can understand what is the tree. Phalena parichayate. The fact that Vyasadeva was inclined towards tapasya, that shows that the union between Parashara and Satyavati was a divine union. Was a divine union. And moreover, as I mentioned, that Parashara Muni worshipped Vishnu and asked for a benediction to have the Vishnu as the son. So this Vyasadeva is none other than the incarnation of Vishnu. He is called as Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa. So when we carefully observe the divine aspects of the story, we can understand that the union between Parashara and Satyavati is not mundane. So, yeah, going ahead, I hope you are able to see the screen. So, let us discuss something about the birth of Vyasadeva versus the contribution of Vyasadeva. Say, for example, if we take a lotus, lotus is found in a place where mud is there. But although lotus is born from a mud, but lotus is considered to be the most beautiful creation in this world. In fact, there are so many verses in the Shastras. Whenever you want to compare a beautiful limb of Vishnu or any other person, it will always be compared with a lotus. But the source of lotus is the mud. Conch shell, the source of conch shell is the body of a snail or from the bone of a snail. But the conch shell is used in religious ceremonies. Conch shell is used to offer water as an arghya in the arti, and conch shell is used to blow the sound just before opening the altar, because the sound of a conch shell, it invokes auspiciousness. But the source of conch shell is not something glorious. The source of conch shell is the bone of a snail. And musk, it is so fragrant. Musk is used directly in the worship of the Supreme Lord, in the deities, worship of the deities. But the source of musk is the belly of a deer. So even if we consider, we see these are some normal day-to-day examples. Even if we consider Vyasadeva's birth to be actually something illicit which is not appropriate, but think about the contribution of Vyasadeva. The contribution of Vyasadeva is more important than even the birth of Vyasadeva. Yeah, definitely Vyasadeva's appearance is unconventional and it is objectionable from the carnal perspective, because even if some people are not aware of the comments given by the acharyas like Madhvacharya and Vadiraja Tirtha, so they may raise objections to Vyasadeva's birth. but his contribution is matchless and unprecedented, and the contribution of Vyasadeva, it is creating such a deep impact in all the classes of people for all time to come, both from the scholastic class to the ordinary people. It creates a deep impact. So, therefore, this has to be kept in mind. We will also discuss about the contribution of Vyasadeva just little later. And also, if we see that this story of Vyasadeva's birth is written none other by Vyasadeva himself. So, generally when a person has a some bad past, when a person is coming from a background which is not appreciated in a common society, normally a person would want to hide that background. One doesn't want to reveal that background to others, or one doesn't like few years back there was a video which was being somehow it became very viral in the social media. There was a school in which some, I think 10th standard or 12th standard exams were going on, but in that school actually in that exam hall, like people were copying, cheating. It was like a government exam, and somehow like that video somebody took it and then they put in the social media, and then it became so viral. And then like that school was from Bihar. So, then like it became so viral that people felt that, oh, people in Bihar are like that, like that kind of a image was created by that video. So, after that, like there is nothing against Biharis or this one, but I am just giving a, just to highlight this point, I am just giving an example. After that, when somebody, say somebody from Bihar, somebody he is going for an interview or something, like in some conversation, when like they would be asked, like, okay, where are you from? So, that person from Bihar, like people from Bihar, they found it reluctant to actually express that, okay, they are from Bihar, even though they have done nothing wrong, just because one particular some school, some examination hall, like people were copying, and then that became so viral, and that had created such an impression. And then people from some of the people from Bihar, they were not willing to reveal that, okay, they are from Bihar, because that is how the atmosphere was created. But here, like in the case of Vyasadeva, although Vyasadeva like apparently Parashara Muni had a union with Satyavati, and then Vyasadeva was born, but Vyasadeva himself writes about the story of his birth. So, this shows the honesty of Vyasadeva. So, usually the authors want to hide their mistakes, they want to hide their shortcomings. There was a Chinese dictator, whenever a doctor would come and test him, the doctor would maintain all the health records of this dictator, Chinese dictator Mao, like Mao we say, like there is a Marxist communist or Maoist. So, this Chinese dictator, then after a doctor would examine all his records, and then that doctor would be shot dead, he would be eliminated, because this dictator was so insecure that he would not want anybody to know his actually shortcomings and diseases, what problems he is going through. And every time like a new doctor would be brought, and then he would be shot, because he did not want the world to know his secrets, because he felt that this person would go and reveal his secrets to others. So, but on the other hand, we see, so that is how insecure say an author, an insecure leader, but Vyasadeva himself writes about his birth. And sometimes we may find people, when they tell about their bad past, they tell in such a shameless manner, and that would inspire other people, that would inspire the reader to commit the same mistakes. But Vyasadeva, when he tells the story of his birth, he speaks with honesty, at the same time with great sensitivity, not in a shameless manner. So, we can appreciate this aspect of Vyasadeva's honesty and sensitivity. So, therefore, that what I want to highlight here is that do not see the birth of Vyasadeva only from a human perspective. See the birth of Vyasadeva also from the divine perspective. In fact, we will actually we will talk about seeing from a human perspective and also from a divine perspective. We will see in the future episodes of this Mahabharata talks also. But what I want to mention here is that if we see only from a human perspective, if we fail to see from a divine perspective, not only our understanding would be incomplete, but you would also come up with many wrong conclusions. It will not only our understanding would be incomplete, but our understanding would also be fraught with many errors. So, therefore, we need to see also from a divine perspective. Therefore, we need to keep in mind the other aspects of the story, how Parashar Muni gave a benediction to Satyavati to retain her virginity, how Vyasadeva immediately went to perform tapasya. And then going ahead, so if you see many of the modern scholars who object about Vyasadeva's birth, many of these modern scholars, academic scholars, they criticize the caste system of India. Many times in the Western academia or anybody who is trained in such an academic circle, and somebody or in the different when an Indian would actually in a conversation, suppose would ask like, where are you from, which country are you from? Then when a person would say that, oh, I am from India, and then they would say, oh, you are from that country where the caste system is there. So, the caste system is actually, in fact, we will discuss about this topic also in detail in the episode of Ekalavya. But generally in the academic circle, the caste system is actually presented in such a deriding manner, and that moment like the caste system of India is presented in such a deriding manner that people always actually criticize that. And one of the criticism which they have is that they criticize the caste system and they criticize the qualification based on the birth. But the very people who criticize the qualification based on birth, but they discriminate against Vyasadeva because he was based on the birth of Vyasadeva. In that way, we can see the double standard of the academic scholars. So, they criticize the aspect of caste system based on the birth. Actually, caste system is not based on the birth. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that Chatur Varnyam Maya Srishtam Guna Karma Vibhagashah Tasya Kartaram Apimam Vidya Kartaram Avyayam. Bhagavad Gita 4th chapter 13th verse. I have created this Varnashram system based on a person's quality and activities. Although I am the creator of this system, but I am transcendental to the system. tasya kartaram api mam vidhi akartaram avyayam. So, and since the caste system is not based on the birth, but so these the modern scholars who criticize the caste system as being based on the birth, but the same people they criticize Vyasadeva because of his birth. So, this shows the double standard. So, let us talk something about the glory of Vyasadeva. So, Vyasadeva is the son of Parashara Muni. Parashara Muni is the author of Vishnu Puran. Parashara Muni is a great rishi. He is the author of the famous Vishnu Puran. And Vyasadeva is the grandson or great grandson of Vasishtha Rishi. So, in one sense, Vyasadeva comes in a lineage of great sages. And Vyasadeva on his own also he has made so many contributions. He has divided the Vedas, he has compiled the Vedas, wrote the Puranas, Mahabharata, Vedanta Sutra, and Vyasadeva wrote the Srimad Bhagavatam, the greatest work of Vyasadeva. And Vyasadeva also produced a son, Shukadeva Goswami, who became the speaker of Srimad Bhagavatam. So, we see in this world some people, they may be glorious because of taking birth in a particular family, because of coming in a glorious dynasty. Some people may be glorious because of their personal contribution, but they may be infamous because from the point of view of a birth in a family. Some people may be some people may have taken birth in a good family and they may have done great work on their own, but their future generation, their son or their legacy, that person's son may be completely opposite to the qualities exhibited by the father. So, I am basically talking about three aspects. One is about the family or dynasty of a person, and second is about the contribution of that person, and third is about the legacy created by the person. In the case of Vyasadeva, Vyasadeva is born in a great dynasty of great sages like Vasishtha and Parashara. In that sense, he was glorious. And Vyasadeva's contribution is also glorious because he divided all the Vedas and wrote the Puranas, Mahabharata, Vedanta Sutra. And Vyasadeva has also created a great legacy in the form of Shukadeva Goswami, who became the speaker of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the first speaker of the Srimad Bhagavatam. In that sense, from all three ways, Vyasadeva was glorious. Like on the other hand, just to compare, like for example, a personality like Hiranyakashipu, he was born in a great family. He was the son of Kashyapa Rishi. In that sense, he was glorious. He had a glorious past, born in a great family. And Hiranyakashipu gave birth to a son like Prahlad Maharaj. And in fact, the Devatas, when they would discuss about a devotee of Vishnu, they would say a devotee means he should be like Prahlad. So, in that sense, Hiranyakashipu had he was born in a great family, and he also was great in the form of producing a son like Prahlad. But his own contribution was he only terrorized the entire universe. On the other hand, we have examples like Anga Maharaj. Anga Maharaj came in the dynasty of Swayambhuva Manu, Dhruva Maharaj. In that sense, he had a great past. and he himself was a great king. But what about his son? His son turned out to be a rogue. His son turned out to be King Vena, who turned out to be a rogue king right from the birth. But in the case of Vyasadeva, he was glorious in all respects, both from the dynasty point of view, his own contribution point of view, and from the creating a legacy in the form of Shukadeva Goswami. So, let us discuss something about Vyasadeva, because just to appreciate, I want you to appreciate the Vyasadeva's actually contribution and his qualities. Let us discuss something how Narada Muni glorifies Vyasadeva in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, Narada Muni says that you have written the most astonishing Mahabharata, which is complete with all the instructions on Artha, Dharma, Kama and Moksha. Jigyasitam susampannam apite mahadadbhutam. And all that a person desires to know is presented perfectly in this work. Mahabharata is a great work of Vyasadeva, which is glorified in many verses. If you read in the Adi Parva of the Mahabharata, so many verses glorify the Mahabharata. And then Vyasadeva, Narada Muni glorified Vyasadeva as Jigyasitam Aditam cha Brahma Yattat Sanatanam. Not only you have got all the scriptural knowledge, because all the scriptural knowledge is presented in the Mahabharata. Not only you have got scriptural knowledge, but you also do not lack in realization of that knowledge, and the proof is that you have written the Vedanta Sutra. You have thoroughly investigated and realized the absolute truth, Brahman, which is eternal, and you have written the Vedanta Sutra. Vedanta Sutra is the greatest scholarly work of Vyasadeva. So, in that sense, Vyasadeva is actually did not lack in knowledge or realization according to Narada Muni. And the same Vyasadeva, how he exhibits actually his honesty and humility in front of his Guru Narada Muni. Vyasadeva, after writing all the Vedic literatures, after writing the Mahabharata, Vedanta Sutra, still Vyasadeva felt a dissatisfaction in his heart. At that time, he first tried to introspect within his mind about what is the cause of my dissatisfaction. When he introspected, he felt, perhaps I have not glorified the Supreme Personality of Godhead, maybe that is the reason for my dissatisfaction. But he wanted to confirm that, he wanted to hear from his Guru Narada. He remembered his Guru and Narada appeared there. And Narada Muni said that, the Vyasadeva told Narada Muni that my mind and body are not satisfied. Tan moolam avyaktam agada bodham prichamate tvatma bhavatma bhutam. Therefore, I am asking you for the imperceptible reason, the reason for my dissatisfaction. Because you are born from, you are directly the son of Lord Brahma, you have got unlimited knowledge. Actually, if you see Vyasadeva, if we compare Vyasadeva with Narada Muni, Vyasadeva, in his credit, all the 4 Vedas with all the sections of the Vedas, Brahmana, Samhita, Aranyaka, Upanishad, Vyasadeva has written all these Vedas, and he has written all the Puranas, and he wrote the Mahabharata and Vedanta Sutra. And Narada Muni, as an author, he just wrote one book, Narada Pancharatra. The number of books written by Vyasadeva is much greater than Narada Muni's books. But Vyasadeva is calling his Guru as, you are the person of unlimited knowledge. And this is the humility of Vyasadeva. In fact, he actually meant it, because this is how he glorified that. This shows actually how Vyasadeva, generally people who are highly accomplished, we may see that they may tend to get carried away by their pride, but Narada Muni, but Vyasadeva, despite writing so many literatures, is calling his Narada Muni as, you are the man of unlimited knowledge. But although Narada Muni has written just only one book, and Vyasadeva is revealing his heart that I am not deeply satisfied despite writing all these books only with the intention to benefit the future people of Kali Yuga. So, we see generally when people who are highly accomplished in any field, either in the academic field or in arts or sports field, etc., when they go through some dissatisfaction or depression, they find it difficult to reveal their they find it difficult to reveal their problems, because one will feel that, oh, what will others think of me, and what will happen to my image. So, in the modern world, because we are all the time, most of the time we are actually exposed to the images from the TV or in the newspaper or in the internet, it conditions a person to always think about image management. How can I present a good image of myself? Instead of working on the real self, people work on image management. How I should actually present myself so that people will have a good image about me. So, generally we find in the recent times people are more inclined towards image management. They find it difficult to reveal their shortcomings and like depressions or dissatisfaction. That is why it is said that people in Kali Yuga are like the fish. When a fish cries, nobody can understand that the fish is crying, because when the fish cries, when it sheds tears, the fish is within the water. You cannot distinguish between the water in the river and the water coming from the eyes of the fish. So, similarly, generally we find that people find it difficult to admit their dissatisfaction or a depression, but Vyasadeva, despite accomplishing so much, he honestly admitted the dissatisfaction he was going through to Narada Muni. So, therefore, we can see that this kind of honesty was exhibited by Vyasadeva, and then Narada Muni told about the reason for his dissatisfaction, and he gave a feedback that because you have not written one literature where you have exclusively glorified the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so therefore you are still feeling a lack of satisfaction. So therefore now you must write one literature where you can exclusively glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Vyasadeva not only revealed his dissatisfaction, but he took that feedback of Narada Muni to his heart, and then he wrote his final work called as Srimad Bhagavatam. So, that is why Srimad Bhagavatam is considered to be the mature fruit of the Vyasadeva's realization. It was written by Vyasadeva in the maturity of his spiritual realization. So, this was written by Vyasadeva after he honestly admitted his dissatisfaction, and he took that feedback of Vyasadeva and acted upon it. So, therefore, we see that from this we can understand Vyasadeva's honesty and humility in front of his Guru Narada. And let us discuss something about Vyasadeva's contribution. So, these verses come in the Tattva Sandarbha. Srila Jiva Goswami quotes about the, in order to describe about the authority of Vyasadeva, he quotes from the Skanda Puran. Vyasa chitta stita kashad avachinnani kanichid anye vyavaharantyetan uri kritya grihadiva. So, he says that others make use of the small collections of ideas they have carved out from the infinite sky of Vyasadeva's mind, and they take advantage of these borrowed ideas like people who pick up things discarded from someone else's house. So, this statement is so profound, like any idea which you may find in this world, if you ultimately trace out, you can find out that that idea you may find it is presented in Vyasadeva's some literature, Vyasadeva's some work. And just like any energy in this world, you can ultimately trace out to the energy coming from the sun. So, similarly, this Skanda Puran says that whatever ideas which actually different authors present in their books, ultimately the ideas are taken from the works of Vyasadeva. So, Parashar Muni says in the Vishnu Puran that during the period of the 28th Manu, the great master, my son Vyasa, divided the one Veda with 4 divisions into 4 separate books. In the same way, the brilliant editor of the Vedas arranged the entire text into various books, just like the other Vyasas in the past. So, Vyasa in one sense, Vyasa means what? One who divides. In one sense, Vyasa is a post. In every Divya Yuga, at the beginning of every Kali Yuga, there would be a personality Vyasa who would divide the Vedas and write down the Vedas. So, in this particular Divya Yuga, in the beginning of this Kali Yuga, the personality of Vyasa who actually divided the Vedas, this Vyasa is an incarnation of Vishnu himself. Whereas in the other yugas, many times that Vyasa would be a living entity who would be empowered to actually perform that task. So, Parashar Muni is mentioning in the Vishnu Purana that Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa is the Supreme Lord Narayan himself, who else on this earth could be the author of Mahabharata. So, and then Skanda Puran also mentions that knowledge in this world was originally generated from Lord Narayan. The Satya Yuga it remained intact, and in Treta Yuga it became somewhat corrupt, and in Dwapar Yuga it became more corrupt. And when knowledge had thus gradually transformed into ignorance because of Gautama Rishi's curse. So, what is this Gautama Rishi's curse? There was a Gautama Rishi, he was actually, he performed tapasya and pleased Lord Brahma, and he asked a benediction from Brahma that let me have prosperity wherever I am staying in the area around me. Let there be always prosperity, let there be abundant grains and vegetables. And Brahmaji actually gave that benediction. After that, Gautama Rishi started inviting different Brahmanas and he would start serving them. And then it so happened that the story comes in the Varaha Puran, like it so happened that there was a severe drought in that particular kingdom. So, So, there was a severe drought in the particular kingdom, but except the area where the Gautama Rishi was staying, because of the benediction received by Gautama Rishi from Brahma. So, Gautama Rishi, he started inviting the different Brahmanas, different people to his actually place, and he started feeding them. And then the Brahmanas were staying there for the duration of the drought. And then finally, when the drought disappeared, when the rains started coming, the Brahmanas wanted to leave the hermitage of Gautama Rishi. And as a matter of custom, they went and asked the permission of Gautama Rishi. But Gautama Rishi requested, you please stay little longer. And then they stayed for some more days, and then again they went to ask permission for Gautama Rishi to take leave. But Gautama Rishi requested, no, please stay more longer. And this it happened a few times, and then these Brahmanas, they wanted to leave, and they became determined to leave, and then they devised a plan, and they made an illusory cow, and then they left that cow near the Gautama Rishi's ashrama. And one day in the early morning, when the Gautama Rishi was going to bathe, the animal blocked the path, and to drive the cow away, he sprinkled a few drops of water on the cow, and immediately the cow actually fell down dead. And the Brahmanas, they raised a voice that, oh, we cannot stay in the house of a cow killer. You have killed a cow, and we cannot stay here any longer. And then they immediately left. And then Gautama Rishi, later he performed an atonement for killing the cow, but then by his mystic power he could understand that he had been tricked. These Brahmanas, they created an illusory cow, and then he had been tricked to actually as if he had performed a go hatya. So, the Gautama Rishi angrily cursed the Brahmanas that the Brahmanas would lose all their Vedic knowledge. So, in this way the Vedic knowledge became covered during Dwapar Yuga. So, when the Vedic knowledge became covered during Dwapar Yuga, so at that time, because of the Gautama Rishi's curse, at that time the Devatas headed by Brahma and Shiva, they went to ask protection from Narayana. And then the Lord Narayan told that very soon I would actually descend in the form of the son of Parashara, and I would restore the neglected Vedas. So, this story of the birth of actually Vyasadeva, this story comes in the Skanda Puran. So, we can see that we can see the divine aspect of Vyasadeva mentioned in the Shastras. And then there is a very famous saying which says that Vyaso Chishtam Jagat Sarvam. Vyaso Chishtam Jagat Sarvam, that means the entire world tastes the remnants of Vyasadeva. That means the entire world, like all the different authors, because in the Vyasadeva's work, all the material knowledge as well as the spiritual knowledge, everything can be found in Vyasadeva's works. So, therefore, the entire world tastes the remnants of Vyasadeva. That is why it is called Vyaso Chishtam Jagat Sarvam. Any new idea one may find or conceive of already exists in his writings. So, therefore, all the authors have borrowed from Vyasadeva. And Vyasadeva's mind is compared to the sky. Just as the sky accommodates all the objects, so similarly Vyasadeva's mind contains all the knowledge, and the sky is also the medium for the sound which transmits the knowledge. So, in other words, Vyasadeva's mind is the medium for the transcendental sound, which is the basis of all kinds of knowledge. So, therefore, if we see Vyasadeva's great contribution is that he has actually written the Vedic literatures. So, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about the glory of knowledge. Like whenever we see, like even in the modern times, like when you want to do good to a person, when you want to do good to the poor people, so people will think, oh, let us give education to that person. But what is the purpose of education? The actual purpose of education is that education should make a person stand on his own leg. Education should make a person independent. Of course, that is not the case in the current time, but the real purpose of education is that it should make a person stand on his own leg. So, therefore, many times giving education, like although the modern education may not serve this purpose, but still like many charitable people, many social workers, when they want to do good to the say poor section of the people, they create a facility for them to get educated. So, even in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna glorifies the importance of knowledge. Yajñātvāna punarmoham evam yasyasi pandava yena bhutanyasheshani drakshasyatman yatomayi. When a person obtains knowledge from a bona fide guru, one will never fall again into illusion. Api chedasi papebhya sarvebhya papakritamah sarvam jnana plavenaiva vrijinam santarishyasi. Even if a person is considered to be the most sinful of all the sinners, but when a person is situated in the boat of transcendental knowledge, he will be able to cross over the ocean of the miseries. Yataidamsi samiddhognir basmasat kurute Arjuna jnanagni sarva karmani basmasat kurute tata. Just as a blazing fire burns firewood to ashes, similarly the fire of knowledge burns all the reactions to the material activities. And then Krishna concludes by saying, Nahi jnanena sadrisham pavitram iha vidyate. There is nothing which is so sublime and pure as the transcendental knowledge. Tat swayam yoga samsiddha kalena atmani vindati. And one who has accomplished in the practice of bhakti enjoys this knowledge in due course of time. So, we see the greatest contribution of Vyasadeva is that his contribution in the form of the Vedic literatures, which enlightens the people. Therefore, I went through these verses from the Bhagavad Gita which talk about the importance of Vedic knowledge. So, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, there is the section which mentions about the Narayana Kavacha mantra. Narayana Kavacha mantra. In those Narayana Kavacha shlokas, and there is an instance which says that Dvaipayano Bhagavan Aprabodhat. That means, may the personality of Godhead in his incarnation as Vyasadeva protect me from all kinds of ignorance resulting from the absence of Vedic knowledge. So, therefore, we see Vyasadeva's greatest contribution is the Vedic knowledge. And as it is said in English, that pen is mightier than the sword. Is mightier than the sword. That therefore, the knowledge is the more powerful than even the physical power. And Vyasadeva is accepted as an authority by all the acharyas of all the sampradayas. Like Madhva Sampradaya may have a difference with Shankara Sampradaya, or Sri Sampradaya may have a difference with the Shankara Sampradaya, and vice versa. And even the different Vaishnava Sampradayas, they may have a difference of opinion about the absolute truth. Like there are different Madhva Sampradayas, their conclusion is called as Shuddha Dvaita. Sri Sampradaya's conclusion is called as the Vishishta Dvaita. In that sense, each Sampradaya has their own conclusion, but all these Sampradayas, they accept the Vyasadeva's authority. In fact, a Sampradaya is considered to be bona fide if they have a commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. and Vedanta Sutra is the book written by Vyasadeva. Therefore, Vyasadeva is considered as accepted as an authority by all the acharyas of different sampradayas. This is something to be kept in mind. And then, let us discuss about Vyasadeva's role in the Mahabharata a little bit. So, let us try to understand the word Udasina versus neutrality. Many times, like as I talked in the last week, that we translate some of the Sanskrit terms into English, like we translate dharma into religion, or we may translate itihasa into as history, but because the English, by the very nature of the language, because it has limitations, therefore, like many of the English, the translated English words, they do not exactly convey the meaning of the import of the original Sanskrit word. We discussed, if you remember, we discussed the example of itihasa. So, similarly, like Udasina generally is translated as neutral, but Udasina is much, it is a very deep word. It is much more than neutral. Generally, a neutral person, he actually he does not side any party. Neutral person will see that although a neutral person does not side any party, the neutral person, he ends up leaning towards the most powerful person. Neutral person, one who does not take any side, that is like a judge or a neutral person. But Udasina is an active participant in the event, but at the same time he actually sees the event from a higher perspective, and then he gives a teaching of that event seeing from the higher perspective, and he teaching about the philosophy of life by seeing from a higher perspective while being a participant in that event. And that is what the position of Vyasa and Valmiki are. Generally, neutral person, they do not participate in the event. Like a judge is not, judge is supposed to be neutral, he is not expected to, he does not participate in the say different say political activities etc. But Udasina, if you see Vyasadeva and Valmiki, they were present when the Mahabharata and Ramayana were taking place. But although they were a participant, although Vyasadeva was a participant in the Mahabharata, although Valmiki was a participant in Ramayana, but at the same time they were seeing the events from a higher perspective, and without any agenda they were giving the darshan of life. Darshan, again, darshan is usually translated as philosophy, but darshan is much more than philosophy. They were giving the darshan of life to all people for all time to come. So, therefore, Udasina is a much deeper word than the word neutral. And Vyasadeva, what is Vyasadeva's role in the Mahabharata? So, Vyasadeva in the, like for example, like just talking a little bit about neutrality, it is said, there is a quote, which, famous saying which said that the hottest places in hell are reserved for those people who in times of great moral crisis maintain their neutrality. Vyasadeva did not maintain his neutrality when there were different moral crises in the Mahabharata. He was a participant, at the same time he saw from a higher perspective and he would give the right indication. If you do this, what will be the consequence? If you actually do this, what will be the reaction? So, Vyasadeva played the role of an indicator. Vyasadeva played the role of an indicator. So, generally many times we find that people who tend to be, who are neutral, they end up taking the wrong side. Even in the Mahabharata we see Bhishma Dev, who wanted to be neutral, but he ended up taking the side of the Kauravas. Balramji, who wanted to be neutral, who did not want to participate in the war, he ended up taking the side of Duryodhan. So, in the case of Vyasadeva, in the Mahabharata, he clearly mentioned what is dharma, and if you perform dharma, what will be the benefit, and if you perform dharma, what will be the consequence. So, Vyasadeva in the Mahabharata, he plays the role of an indicator. More than Sri Krishna, Vyasadeva plays this role, because Sri Krishna played the role of a human being. Therefore, Krishna did not give indicative signals of the future events. But on the other hand, Vyasadeva gave indications from time to time. At the time of the birth of Duryodhan, Vyasadeva gave an indication about the personality, what kind of a person Duryodhan would be. He gave an indication about what kind of a person Dhritarashtra would be. Vyasadeva gave an indication to Yudhishthira Maharaj at the Rajasuya Yajna that 13 years from now, making you as an instrument, there will be a great war, and then the burden of the demoniac population in the earth would be removed. So, Vyasadeva many times he played he played the role of an indicator in the Mahabharata, and for in that way he gave indication to the characters of the Mahabharata, and the same Vyasadeva has indicated many times in the Mahabharata, if people follow dharma, they will be happy. Dharmo rakshati rakshatah. One who protects dharma, he will be protected. And if people fail to follow dharma, disastrous consequences will follow. So, this particular indication of following dharma, this is meant for people for all time to come. So, therefore, we see that this is one of the role of Vyasadeva in the Mahabharata. And finally, we will discuss Vyasadeva's role, how he comes in the greatest school of critic. Vyasadeva is the founder of the greatest school of the critic. So, we find that nowadays, because of the social media, anybody can comment about anything. So many, previously there was only newspapers, and then if you have to write some comment about some newspaper article, you have to write a letter and the editor would reply. But now, because of any article which is there, anything, anybody can comment anything. So, criticism could be seen as a threat or a very essential part of one's growth, depending on how the criticism is being received. So, generally objections are raised whenever there is an evidence or experience contrary to what has been proposed or believed. And there are two types of criticism. One is the constructive criticism and another is a non-constructive criticism. In a non-constructive criticism, a person actually criticizes with a wrong motivation. He wants to actually malign the personality, he wants to insult a personality, or one wants to take create a bad image of a personality. It is done out of envy and malice. But a constructive criticism is that which is aimed to highlight something that is being ignored, or something that is being disregarded or overlooked. In a constructive criticism, a person has a good intention, a person has a good clarity, and it is done out of sympathy and the constructive criticism is done out of great empathy towards a person. It may have a positive or a negative impact depending on how the person wants to take the criticism, but constructive criticism is aimed at the betterment of a person. So, we find that many times when there is a powerful leader has the power to hijack the favorable and popular opinions from people and claim as their own, and simultaneously a powerful leader can subdue any negative views on them with the help of money and different people they will purchase. So, many times like the ugly reality gets buried in a deep pit of a covered past. The ugly reality gets buried, like for example, if you see the like a Holocaust of the Jews, they have actually how they were actually killed in the Second World War. They had they have actually presented that in the form of the different zoos and museums about the Holocaust. Therefore, now the people know that how the Jews were killed mercilessly. But whereas if we talk about the period during the Mughal invasion, during the British period, during about the Bengal famine, but all these different things, practically the people in India, they are not aware of that history, because many times the ugly reality is buried by the powerful people, and then because of that then begins a fake history, and the so called good is disproportionately magnified. Tipu Sultan is glorified as a great king, although he killed so many people, and the bad is seldom spoken about. So, this is the place where we need critics. What is the role of a critic? A role of a critic is somebody who can highlight the bad in an appropriate proportion to the good, so that it creates a better sense of history for the next generation. So, the bad and good both have to be highlighted, but in an appropriate proportion. Otherwise, if that is not done, there is no meaning to experience wisdom and history without its essential quality, the truth. So, therefore, that that in the case of Vyasadeva, the greatest contribution of Vyasadeva is that the Vyasadeva in his Mahabharata, he invites us to experience the every character's good side, bad side and the actual side. So, there is not even a single character in the Mahabharata where Vyasadeva has not has hidden actually the limitations of that character. Every character he has presented their limitations, their dark side as well as their good side, whether it is Bhishma or Yudhishthir or Kunti or even Gandhari. Because last week we discussed that the 7 purposes of Mahabharata is to talk about the chastity of Gandhari, to talk about the determination of Kunti, about the dharma practiced by the Pandavas. But Vyasadeva has not hidden some of the mistakes of even these great people, although they are great people, but he has also mentioned about the limitations of them. And at the same time, Vyasadeva does not hide their good side as well. So, therefore, he brings out the different shades of the people in a real way, and when he presents the bad side of the people, the aim of Vyasadeva is not to flatter his aim of Vyasadeva is not to slander that person, and the aim of Vyasadeva is not to flatter any person in a disproportionate way. He questions everyone and he raises our level of understanding. So, therefore, that like for example, like in the Mahabharata before the battle began, there is a conversation between Krishna and Bhishma, where Krishna questions about the different mistakes committed by Bhishma in the past. So, Vyasadeva has not hidden this conversation which took place between Krishna and Bhishma, and the same Vyasadeva has not hidden that how Krishna declared Vyasadeva as the Mahajana after the battle was over. So, we can see how Vyasadeva has presented all the aspects. So, therefore, that therefore we see in conclusion, human beings have always had an urge to build up artificial justification around their actions. Whenever somebody commits a mistake, people want to justify their mistakes, and many times this urge to justify one's mistakes is greater than the need to actually experience the truth. So, because of this urge to justify one's mistakes, one actually fails to experience the truth. So, therefore, the good and bad that spring from one's prejudices and sermons to control the masses are extremely destructive and must naturally meet an unfavorable consequence. So, therefore, we see that Vyasadeva, but when he has presented the characters in the Mahabharata, he has presented from a very neutral perspective while being a participant in the Mahabharata, in order to educate us, to actually to raise us to a higher level of understanding. So, therefore, that these are some of the points by which we can actually appreciate the Vyasadeva's contribution. To summarize, what we discussed today was that we began with the birth of Vyasadeva, and then we discussed, although externally how the birth of Vyasadeva seems to be, he was born from an illicit connection between Parashara Muni and Satyavati or Matsyagandha, but we discussed about the divine aspects of the Vyasadeva's birth, and we discussed about the comments made by Madhvacharya and Vadiraja Tirtha in connection to the Vyasadeva's birth, and then we discussed that there are many things even in our normal day to day things, that the source of the lotus or conch shell or the musk, although the source is not something glorious, but their contribution, they are considered to be great, pure, they are used in very religious purposes, religious ceremonies, etc. So, similarly, even if you consider the birth of Vyasadeva to be something which is infamous, which is something illicit, but what about the contribution of Vyasadeva? We discussed about that. In regards to Vyasadeva's contribution, how the whole world benefits from Vyasadeva. Vyaso chishtam jagat sarvam, everything is nothing but all the knowledge in the world is nothing but the remnants of Vyasadev's. And then we discussed about how Vyasadeva is mentioned as an incarnation of Vishnu, the Krishna Dvaipayana of Vyasa. And we also discussed about Vyasadeva's role in Mahabharata as an indicator, and how Vyasadeva is the founder of the greatest school of critic. In fact, this should be studied by everyone. In the current times, there are people who write different articles, who make different opinions, but ultimately they have sold their intelligence for somebody. They have sold themselves and they have sold their intelligence to some party, some entity, and by taking some money, they actually disproportionately magnify some apparent good and completely hide the certain ugly reality. But Vyasadeva, on the other hand, he has, while being a participant in the Mahabharata, but he has written the events of the Mahabharata from the higher perspective. And we discussed the difference between Udasina and neutral. So, these were some of the points we discussed today. With this, I will actually conclude today's class. If anybody has any questions or comments, then we'll take up some. Yeah, the third is that nahi the third is nahi transcendental knowledge. There is nothing pure compared to transcendental knowledge. You can just unmute yourself, mute yourself. So the last verse is that there is nothing which is impure. Transcendental knowledge is the purest thing. Nahi jnanena sadrisham pavitram iha vidyate. That was the verse. This is 4th chapter, I think 38 or 39th verse. The purest thing is the transcendental knowledge. That's what it's mentioned. So I think we shall end the class because it is almost 12:06, 12:07. So thank you very much for your patient hearing. So tomorrow we will take up the next topic about the birth of Pandu Maharaj, Dhritarashtra and Vidur. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.